Hi, this is a sample recording from AppCo Technology. Today I'm going to show you how to connect to a database using PHP code. We're using the MySQL database, which goes well in hand with most PHP-based websites. Now, when you're creating an interactive website, it is important that you basically connect to the database not only from the code, but also you connect to the database on every page. So any page that's going to retrieve information from the database or send information to the database needs to have a connection to the database. Now you can see here that I have created a sample database called Blogtastic, which is for blogs. There's a few tables here, and I'm going to go ahead and create write the PHP code to connect to this database. This database is located on a local host. The name of the database is Blogtastic. They're on your PHP as part of your config.php file. So whenever you create a web-based application, it's important that you create a basic configuration file in which you enter all the variables that you're going to use throughout the website. This way, if you ever make a change, you can easily go ahead and just make that change in one place rather than making the changes in 30 places. If you make an application that you're probably planning to sell to other companies, then they can also just go ahead and change the name according to whatever their settings are in one place, and the change is reflected. This is what we call as scalability, and it's very important when you're creating websites, because technically a website is never complete and you need to change it from time to time. Anyway, moving forward, one of the things you do want to do is basically go ahead and make sure that you import the privileges. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the privileges tab here, and privileges is where you create a user. For each application, you need to create a user for yourself. I'm going to go ahead and create root, but you can always click on add a new user and grant them the appropriate privileges so that they can access that particular database. So here we're going to go ahead and start again. The database is Blogtastic. It's being hosted on localhost with the user root and the password. So once that's done, you can go ahead and use any standard HTML editor, and I'm going to go ahead and create the very first file for this blog application, which is going to be a PHP file, and I'm going to go ahead and select PHP here and click create. Once the new file is created, it automatically has some HTML, but since it's all going to be in PHP, I can go ahead and delete everything. Now the first thing I want to start out with is by clicking on starting with the PHP delimiters, which marks the beginning and ending of PHP. And I like this thing in Dreamweaver, which is the text editor that I'm using. You can use any other text editor or any HTML editor that like Text++ or Coffee HTML, but this Dreamweaver not only suggests the options of a function, but also if you have, as you are typing, if you don't put the right syntax, Dreamweaver will go ahead and point out to you the error, so you can automatically look at all the errors as you are typing or correct them as you're typing. So once you've entered the PHP delimiters, always start with the proper comments. So here I'm going to go ahead and enter a comment that define the variables for the database. So for the database, we need 4 variables. The first variable is going to be $db host, which in my case is localhost. You will have to type either the fully qualified domain name of your server, or you can use localhost if your code and the database is on the same server, which in most smaller websites using PHP and MySQL, that is usually the case. Then we go ahead and start with entering the next variable, which is $db user, and this one I'm going to go ahead and type root. Please make sure that on a professional website you don't use root, because otherwise your root is the main administrator of a MySQL database. If you use that, then it can get into the wrong hands and sometimes cause a huge problem. So as part of a security risk, you should always create a different user and set that as your user. Avoid using words like root or admin or super in your usernames, because that's what usually what people look for, or hackers look for that. So moving further, we're going to also define the password here, which in my case is the password for $dbs. And then the fourth icon that we're going to use here is the name of the database, because on a standard MySQL database there can be many different databases, so we have to specify which particular database we're using. So I'm going to go ahead and type $db database, and we're going to call that Blogtastic. The whole name has been created as it's a fantastic blog, so Blogtastic. So moving further, before I connect to the database, I like to specify a few other variables that should be part of the config file. So other site related variables. Also make sure that whenever you're coding in any language, remember, you yourself will not remember what your code is, so it's very important that you write appropriate comments. Otherwise, 6 months later, when you want to make a change and you come back to the same website, then you will realize that you yourself is not able to understand your code. So proper comments will always help you, and the best part is that if a user or a visitor tries to view source on your site, they can't see your comments anyway. So moving further, I'm going to go ahead and define our site name, because I usually call that the config underscore site name, and I use this as a header, so I'm going to call it the ultimate blog. Once that's completed, the other one I want to do is specify the base URL, because a lot of times you will be needing this one, so we'll call this the base URL. Just as a small tip, when you create a login page, if a user logs incorrectly, then you would want to direct them to the home page, and that's where you would use the config base URL instead of the full URL. So that's where you type the full URL of your website, including the HTTP. Mine is right now a sample, so I'm just doing localhost/projects/blogtastic. So these are mainly the variable. Now the last one I want to do for the search engine is provide the site author. So I'm going to just config underscore author. So it's always good to know who the author of the site is. You can put this information in the footer of your file. So that's done. Now we provide the functions. So functions to connect to the database. So the first function that you want to connect to the database is called MySQL Connect. It has three options. The first option is the name of the server, the second option is the name of the username to log in, and the third option is the password. Please remember that your site, each time that it wants to retrieve something from the database or send something through the database, the application or the website has to log into the database, and that's the reason what we need is a handle, and this handle will be used by the application to connect. Now some books and documentation will call it handle, but I usually prefer $db. So I'm going to go ahead and provide $db equals MySQL underscore connect, and notice that this is another thing. As you can see here, that Dreamweaver has automatically provided the three required options, which is the name of the server, the username, and the password. But since we have already specified those in variables above, I'm just going to use the variables here separated by comma. So the first option is $dbHost. The second option is $dbUser. And the third option is $dbPassword. Now once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the parenthesis and put a semicolon, and I'm done. Now if I want, I can go ahead and put a check here. So what I can do is go ahead and say if not $db. Now usually because of the function, the value of $db returned would be true or false. So here in PHP, instead of saying if $db equals true or if $db equals false, you can just go ahead and say if $db, which is equivalent of saying if $db equals false, equals true. Or you can put an exclamation, which is the same as saying if $db equals false. So here we go, and we go ahead and put a opening and go a few steps down and then closing. I always do that. I put the opening and closing brace so that I'm not worried about when it opens or forget something. And then of course Dreamweaver will keep giving me errors if I don't close it. So here I'm going to go ahead and basically here I can go ahead and type the $db equals, if not $db, then I can say echo not connected to the database. So this automatically helps me basically know if the site is not connected to the database. Now sometimes what can happen is your server may be unavailable or something else could be the problem. Now just so that my screen fits into the camera, I'm going to go ahead and move the window and scroll down so we can all see what I'm typing. So we go here, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter a few times, and this way this part of the screen comes in here. So now this will automatically let us know we don't need anything else. And now, so if we don't get this information, then you can go ahead and move to the select DB. Now also bear in mind that instead of echo you could use die, which is another option, but for beginners I would prefer that they start with echo. Then the next one is where I'm going to basically call DB connect, DB select. I'm going to call it DB select, and this one is where we are going to select the database. So that's MySQL _ select _ DB. And again, you'll notice that this one has two options. The first one is the name of the database, and the second one is the optional option, which is the handle, which in our case is going to be $db. So here the name of the database, we'll scroll up and we'll see that we created a variable called $db database. So we're going to go ahead and use that $db database, comma, and $db, which is the handle, which is also required. Now once again, if you want, you can go ahead and run an if statement to do that, but I'm not going to do that because I think these lines are sufficient, and that marks the end of this config file. The last thing that I want to do is go ahead and save it. I'm going to go ahead and save it as config.php within my existing one. I already have a previous config sample, so I'm going to go ahead and save it as same. Would you like to overwrite this file? Yes. So this is your main config file. You've defined all your variables here. You're connecting to the database here. Now any pages that you create for your website, what you can do is add this config file using the include function which is include, and then in parentheses put config.php as the argument, or you can use it as require config.php. So whenever I create an application, this is the first step that I do, and then we begin the coding of other pages. This was a part of our PHP Advanced course at ABCO Technology, in which we train our students and make them develop 6 different applications in class. So the Advanced PHP is not just teaching some advanced functions, but actually making you create 6 different applications. If you are interested, you can go ahead and call our main line at 310-216-3067, or you can go ahead and visit our website at www.abcotechnology.com. Feel free to comment on this video so that I can really get a good feedback and in the future prepare better videos. So hope this was helpful for everybody, and feel free to contact us even if you have any questions. Have a nice day.